as a matter of introduction. So I said, what is the point in introducing a jackal to an august audience with glowing terms? For tigers, don't need introduction. When they stand before you, he will not have to say, I am a tiger. You will see him by his stripes. But a jackal like me requires an introduction. But it has to be commensurate to my stature. So therefore, I requested sir to introduce me in those terms. And I'm grateful to you for saving the day for me. Otherwise, I would have had to give my lecture to the walls. But I wouldn't have been disappointed. Trust me. Because when I was young and I used to read Phantom, there was a very frequented line. The jungle has 1,000 eyes, and there was an English adage, the walls have ears. So my lecture would have still been heard by the walls. As for you, if you are a journalist, then your entire bread and butter hinges on event reporting. And if the event is gone, your chance to report has also. So it's for you to see, to find your way to pay for. If sir had been charging 3 lakh rupees of fee from each of you to be in a course called Bachelor's in Journalism and Mass Communication or Master's in Journalism and Mass Communication, I'm sure this hall would have been full by 10:15 a.m., 15 minutes before the starting time. But because we've been given privileges, we've been given a lot of costing buffer at the expense of the state, at the expense of the university, at the expense of the poor people of India. Therefore, we take it casually. My experience in private institutions is, before you enter, the classroom is packed because they've paid. And some of them have paid through their nose to be in that course. And that brings me to a understanding. I wonder, why do people oppose or support reservation? Whenever you give, and as a lawyer, let me say not whenever, usually, mostly when you give privileges, allowances to people who haven't earned it, they take those privileges and allowances casually. And when you make them sweat for it, they value it. This is a hard fact. You will not like this. Many of you may not like me saying this. And let me assure you, many of you will not like whatever else I have to say. So you have an option. If you don't have the appetite to hear something that you don't want to hear, you don't want to be wasting your time here. And you don't want to be hurting your emotions. And if you are a hard-nosed journalist or a budding lawyer who can countenance the truth in whatever form, in whatever garb it is presented, then you are in the right place. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. There is one line broken into 3, which I want you to make a note of. Rest, nothing in my lecture will I ask you to write. You don't have to. And I will not be showing you 20 slides to do whatever. The first line, which is the broken part of whatever, is Paru is a cat. P-A-R-U. That is her name. Paru is a cat. And the second line is Arnav goes to school. A-R-N-A-V. This is the boy's name. Paru is a cat. Arnav goes to school. And the third line is Kacha. Kacha is a corrupted form of the Hindi word Chacha, meaning uncle. So a small child wanting to call his uncle uncle as Kacha, as Chacha, inadvertently ends up calling him Kacha. K-A-C-H-C-H-A. K-A-C-H-C-H-A. The third line is Kacha does bakwas. You know what bakwas in Hindi means? Right? If somebody doesn't know me, please raise your hands. Okay, good. So the three lines are, Paru is a cat. Arnav goes to school. And Kacha does bakwas. Okay? When my nephew was younger and he was just being initiated into use of laptop, I made him sit by my side and he said, Kacha, I'll help you with your petition typing work. I said, yes, please, you're welcome. So I made him write. He asked me, what should I type? What should I write? I made him write things that I thought he is familiar with. So Paru was a cat who used to visit our home. So I made him write, Paru is a cat. The next thing was his neighbor, his neighboring child of his age who used to go to school. So I had written, instead of go to school, I had written, Arnav is a boy. And when my friend Chandrika ji heard of it, she said, hey, what are you teaching your child? You are teaching him gender? That's what you want to teach him? The first thing is you have to teach him to look everybody as human being. So I modified it. Like the criminal law bills have been amended. I meekly modified it to Arnav goes to school, because the child was going to school and this child knew there is something called school and we go to school. And Arnav, his neighbor, goes to school. So the next line he wrote was Arnav goes to school. So what I gave him to write in the beginning was what he knew. Paru is a cat, Arnav goes to school, and the third line was the wisdom of Bodh Gaya. You know what Bodh Gaya is? The place where Gautam Buddha was sitting under a tree, and that was the moment he got enlightenment. Not of the tree, not because of Bodh Gaya, but it was incidental. He was there. God wanted him to be enlightened, and that was the moment of enlightenment. The third line is your moment of enlightenment. Paru is a cat, Arnav goes to school, Kacha does bakwas. So whatever I'm going to teach you here, whatever I'm going to say here, whatever be my utterance, however strong be its logic, please don't take it per se and without a pinch of salt. The first thing I want you to learn is to apply your mind to what confronts you. And more so, if you are a budding journalist. If somebody says his government has built 5 lakhs of toilets in a day in Bihar, don't take it up front. If somebody announces in his prime ministerial speech or some other occasion wherein he says, and we have opened an AIIMS in Darbhanga, Bihar. And I was going to Darbhanga regularly, almost every second month or month, because of a certain case in the district. And I visited the place. It was nothing but a piece of land where a tractor was standing idly. And the speech had said that they have built an AIIMS in Darbhanga. So you as a journalist have to understand that your first and foremost duty is to apply your mind and not to take utterance, rhetoric on its face value and for whatever it may sound, or whatever the person who's wanting to buy you out emotionally, intellectually, or on the want of occasion. You don't want to subscribe to that upfront. Next, let me ask you and find out how many well-read people are here. And as I said, there are lots of things that I'm going to say which will which will not be of very let me call it, which will not be of very whatever happy hearing at your end, but never mind. So I want to find out how many of you are well read. How many of you have read a few pages of the Bible? Please raise your hands. Okay. How many of you have read a few pages of the Vedas? Any of the Vedas? Just one. How many of you have read a few pages of the Quran? Okay. And how many of you have read a few pages of the Torah or of the Granth Sahib? And how many of you, welcome, we were waiting for you.
Thank you.
And how many of you have read either Engels, Monumental Work, Property, or Das Kapital of Karl Marx? So that is our status of being well read. Apart from the last two, the rest are supposed to be carrying a lot of divine or corrupted divine wisdom, whichever way you want to call it. They had inspiration received by people, then there was a human intervention. That's why I'm calling it corruption. Down the epochs, down the 100 years of time, and so either it's verbatim or it's a corrupted version of divine wisdom. Even a corrupted version of divine wisdom is better than no wisdom. And if you have wisdom, and if you understand that Paru is a cat, Arnav goes to school, and Kacha does Bagwas, then even corrupted wisdom will lead you and guide you to real wisdom. My philosopher friend, I'm taking the liberty to call her friend, otherwise she's a mentor. Who has heard of J. Krishnamurti? Okay, she's somebody like J. Krishnamurti. So my philosopher friend, Chandrika ji, tells me, and if you are not able to follow the Hindi, please tell me, I'll translate it into English. सत्य धर्म को पहुंचने के लिए पहले धर्म को ध्वस्त करना होगा. Who did not understand this? Literally, no, not the meaning. सत्य धर्म को पहुंचने के लिए, to reach the true religion, पहले धर्म को ध्वस्त करना होगा. First you will have to annihilate religion. और जब तुम धर्म को ध्वस्त कर दोगे, and when you will annihilate religion, तुम्हें सत्य धर्म का रास्ता नजर आ जाएगा. You will find the path to true religion. Now, upfront I was surprised, but when I went to a Mussalman and asked him, "What are you?" He said, "Shia." And then I asked him, "What are Sunnis?" Then he told me 5 things about how Sunnis are at fault, where they have erred in seeing the path of God. I went to a Sunni and checked it out. He said, "I'm a Sunni." And he counted 6 things about how Shias are at fault. Then I caught hold of a Sardarji. He said, "Akal Takht at Amritsar is the religion. And do not go to people at Patna Sahib. I know you go to Bihar a lot because for reason of your cases. Because that is the wrong form of religion." I went to Patna Sahib and they said, "This is the true Sikhism and that is not." I walked into a cathedral. His Holiness was a Catholic and he told me how Protestants have corrupted the faith. And I walked into another church and I was told how Catholics are the people who have corrupted the great religion. I walked into a Sanatan Dharma mandir, and I was told how other people are doing it wrong. And I walked into another denomination, and I was told how the rest, all of them, have truly lost their path to God. Now listen to this again. Satya धर्म को पहुंचने के लिए, to reach the true religion, पहले धर्म को ध्वस्त करना होगा. To reach the true religion, you will first have to annihilate religion. And when you do so, the path to true religion will become clear and open to you. So that is how I understood Chandrika ji's utterance. Now, friends, you might be bewildered. How does something meant to be shared with journalists on an occasion of celebrating new criminal laws would have all this? I'll take you to the first line. Paru is a cat. Arnav goes to school. Kacha does bakwas. As a journalist, you have to listen to whatever is being put to you before people. You have to see, you have to observe. And then you have to apply your mind. And then you have to corroborate whatever little evidences you can. And then you have to arrive at whatever you do. That is journalism. Godi media is not journalism. Propaganda is not journalism. So that's where we have our foundations right. So going forwards from here, we've understood what professional reporting really entails. It is to be honest, to be truthful, and what the discovery of truth entails. What is journalism? The first is observation. You observe something. If a man came in, he shot me through the head, and I was gone to Bhagwan, to God, to Allah, to whoever, or to nobody if you are an atheist. So as a journalist, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to observe what happened. Observation. And observation can be a lot misleading. That is why I do not trust hadith. Who is the person who had read the Quran? Okay. That is why I do not trust hadith as much as I trust Quran. Because what is hadith? Hadith is an utterance reportedly uttered by the Holy Prophet. And were you there when the Prophet was uttering something? No. I wasn't also. So it was heard by somebody who was by his side. And that gentleman went and told to somebody else that this is what the Holy Prophet said. And then this gentleman went and told to somebody else, that's what the Holy Prophet said. And then it came down to us. So that's hadith. So that has a lot of human intervention, errors or bias in it. As a researcher, I will not call it error. Error, I would call it when I come to the finding. I will call it bias. So that has a human intervention bias in it. And that has another bias, occasional bias. Occasioned. What is the occasion there? A man came in and shot me through the head. What you saw was a man, or what you saw was a figure, or what you saw was a shadow. When I cross-examined you in the court, you said, sir, the corridor was dim lit. I could not see the face of the man. Sir, what I saw was the figure was wearing a long men's coat. And the figure was wearing a hat, which is only a rider's, a gentleman's hat. So I concluded it's a man who came and shot Shams Khwaja in the head. Right? But when I'll examine you in the court, and I'll ask you, how do you know it was a man? You will be, in your own stead, you will be forced to say, I'm sorry. I presumed it was a man. Because I did not take his hat off, nor did he, and tip his hat and say, good evening, ma'am. I've just shot this gentleman. Bye-bye. Secondly, he did not take off his long coat. So I had no idea whether it's a man or a woman and whatever it is. So from the utterance that a man shot Shams Khwaja in the head, the news line will change to somebody, a person shot Shams Khwaja in the head. Got it? That is what has happened with hadith in many places. The listener has presumed, listener has taken elements which are true to and honest to his perception. I can swear the person is being honest. I can swear he's got no ill intention. And he reported what he saw. So truth finding, journalism's first step is discovery of truth. So truth finding, if somebody knows the rigors of how hadith is titrated, whether this hadith is quotable or not. Many hadiths have been fabricated by clergymen. They want to put down a certain segment. They want to say women are lesser, lower in Islam. What they will do is, they'll quote a verse from the Quran. وَلِلْرِجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ daraja, and the men folk have a positioning vis-a-vis the women folk. That's the verbatim, the translation of Quran, one line. Now, what these people do not say is positioning does not mean one is superior to the other. So, in all situations of life, the discovery of truth is challenged, is vitiated by certain biases. I will be respectful, I will not call them errors up front. You will call them errors after you've run the whole gamut of that piece of journalistic event. And mind you, this has all got to do with a lot of criminal law and a lot of what changes have been made in the criminal law. So unless you understand how, where and what to use a piece of law for a journalist, there is no point in telling you section this is what changed to this and this is not good. That utterance is just meaningless jargon. This is being more practical, more pragmatic. Each of you, when you entered this hall, had a certain station in your life, had a certain station in your learning, had a certain station in your profession. When you exit this hall, that station must change. And if that station hasn't changed, my lecture has failed miserably. When you walk in here and you walk out from there, you need to be a changed man, you need to be a changed woman, you need to be a changed journalist. Then alone I have profited from this endeavor. Okay? So that is why I am laying the very important foundation of what we need to build on. And the foundation, trust me, let me tell you, the foundations are more important than the structure above it. Why? Are you saying, you idiot jackal, that what has been changed in the criminal law is less important than the rubbish you are uttering? Yes, it is so. It is so. I remember there was a law which was called the Salt Act. Who has heard of the Salt Act? Passed by the British government? 1920s or 1911, I don't remember. Okay? One of my grandparents, my grandmother's real kid brother, joined Gandhiji in a village in Maharashtra as he was about to reach the sea coast. I know it from personal history, how Gandhiji, how other people executed that event. The Salt Act was, you cannot make a salt without, be louder, I am hard of hearing and I use a body aid so that any little cat who passes by or who speaks to me knows that this monkey is hard of hearing. So I use this here. So now you be loud, please. What did she say? Can you?
I think there's a tax.
Pardon me?
There's a tax that they have to pay.
Yes, that's a tax they had to pay. So Gandhiji voiced his opinion against the tax. Why should we pay tax on salt? And he said, I will go and make salt in the sea and pay no taxes to the government. And that was called Salt Satyagraha. Okay? Today, surgical supplies, today, medicine, today, milk, today, butter is being inflicted a tax called GST. And you are all clapping, most of you, for the person who's inflicting that. Gandhiji did not tolerate this. He said, out on this. That was Mahatma Gandhi, and this is Mahatma yourself. And don't blame the person who's inflicted the tax on the GST. Blame yourself. In a democracy, you've been given the power to choose. If you make the wrong choices, there you are. You lie in the bed you made. My point, both in criminal law and in journalism, is Gandhiji acted in a certain manner. And then what was done to him? The British people rained lathis and blows on his people. लाठी ली और मारा, सर पे मारा, किसी के पैर पे मारा, किसी के फ्रैक्चर हुआ, किसी के खून निकला. And there was a British reporter, like this gentleman here. He reported the same evening. He said, tap, tap, tap. There was wire reporting, Morse code. Somebody knows what Morse code was? Yeah. Morse code was like this. Because we didn't have a voice line, we didn't have a text line, it was A, B, C, and so on. That was called Morse code. So the whole text would go on Morse code. And that's why you had to be brief on telegram. So tap, tap, tap. That journalist wrote, I witnessed Gandhi coming to the sea to make salt. Stop. The police resisted him. Stop. Gandhi and his followers did not heed the police. Stop. The police, upon command, rained blows with bamboo sticks on Gandhi and his followers. Stop. Some of the followers were bleeding from the head. Stop. Some of the followers were hurt and they had their limbs, leg or whatever hands fractured. Stop. The number of followers at the site was greater than the number of policemen at the site. Stop. However, not one person reacted with violence against the policemen. Stop. That's it. It became headlines in England. One journalist's telegram. The Parliament of England started debating, hey, why are we taxing salt? What are our laws doing? And then came Jallianwala Bagh. Another British journalist reported. It was not like what you guys are doing today in India to some Muslims in some corner, and the same is not getting reported. What you guys are doing in India to women and some people in Manipur, and little of it is being reported, and what you guys are doing somewhere else in India, and it is not being reported. Those journalists were journalists of integrity. They were white-skinned. They were Catholics. They considered your religion and you as pagans. They considered you as slaves. They had better dominion over you. They were rightful in their might of right. Still, they were honest to their journalistic profession. And they wrote these dispatches, and the Parliament of England started debating, what are we doing in India? They asked Prime Minister Attlee, they asked the other Prime Minister before him, they asked the Prime Ministers after him, what are we doing in India? Is this human civilization? Is this British culture? Is this our heritage? And the resistance to liberation of India waned. It became weaker in the parliament. Who was doing it? Journalists. And who was stopping it? Law. It was law. When Gandhiji wanted to make salt, he was breaking the law. When they gathered at Jallianwala Bagh and the announcement came, this is a peaceful gathering but no longer lawful because I, as the collector, have ordered you to disperse. Please do so within 5 minutes or so. That was law. Then again the announcement was made, if you do not disperse, we will use force to dissipate you. What was it? Law. And the assembly became, what assembly? Unlawful assembly. As our Home Ministry very ardently calls all inconvenient people as unlawful assembly. They become unlawful. Because the person who is supposed to be law and order in charge is going to declare it unlawful. So you become an unlawful assembly. And then that unlawful assembly reported went forwards to grant you freedom. Friends, this is the dynamics. A lot of people teach you to abide with law. I will teach you not to abide with law, but to regard law. Journalists should regard law and should abide with them so far as their profession allows them to do so. They have to be truthful to their profession. Because it is journalism that changed the laws. It is journalism that started and ignited the march which gave us freedom in a lot of ways, in a lot of manners. It's for the journalist who has to see whether a piece of law is right or wrong. Legal theorists around the world, not in India, have said this very expressly. Law is a tool of both suppression as well as empowerment. It depends how you use it. So that's where you have to keep your eyes open and look at it. The duty of a journalist begins with truth discovery, then truth assessment or truth verification, right? Truth discovery was somebody came and shot Mr. Shams Khwaja. A man came and shot Mr. Shams Khwaja. This is truth discovery. But the discovery was, oh no, this wasn't a man, this could be a woman. So that's truth discovery. Then it comes to truth assessment and verification. Then you have to come and verify. Was the person who was shot, was he Shams Khwaja? Or was he what? And was he shot? And was he shot dead? Or was he just shot and the shot missed his head and whizzed by? That is verification. And then what do? Then you go and do truth documentation, which you call as reporting. So you report what you've observed, what you've verified. Now tell me at this stage, if what you have written, if what you have observed, and what you have half or fully verified, and you have reported, it's documented, is that the acceptable official version? The official version is there is no violence happening in Manipur. Take a flight, go there, find out. I don't have to tell you. But that is not the official version. So here is where the journalists start getting confronted with official versions. And they say, official version is the truth. You have concocted a story. Go to Kashmir. Every third story reported by Kashmiri journalists is a truth observed, truth documented, truth verified, and truth documented. But they are being hauled under different laws for false reporting. Because the official version is everything is clear, hunky and dory. When I contested the 2019 elections in Kashmir for a specific purpose as an independent candidate. Prior to that, there was consistent government propaganda that all is normal in Kashmir. All is normal in Kashmir. I chose a constituency. And do you know the name of the constituency? No. The name of that constituency was Anantnag. What was it? Anantnag. Anantnag, beta, was the only and is the only constituency about which the Election Commission of India had written to the government of India, sorry, we cannot hold the election for you for one constituency in one day. You have a tradition of holding elections in different constituencies in a state on different days. You will never find in the history of India that an election has been held in one constituency on 3 different dates in 3 different phases. And that was Anantnag. And that's why I chose it. It was the most terrorist-infested constituency. And I chose it. Because I had to bring the constitution to the people, about the constitution to the people. I saw it an opportunity. So I joined in the fray. My point is, on government official records, there was peaceful progress happening. There was no violence. There was no terrorism threats of a significant importance, and therefore elections could be held normally. The word uttered by the government was, there is normalization in Kashmir. And when I went and took the constituency as my terrain, I found the normalization was to this extent. So again, there will be umpteen situations where the journalist will conflict with the official position. Whether it be of this party or that party, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like your elder friend Ravish Kumar says, when Congress was in power, we used to question them. Today BJP is in power, we are going to question them. Tomorrow if somebody else comes into power, we will question them. That's the role of a journalist to do. So, you have laws, and now the laws have been sharpened to not only challenge your verification of truth, to hold you responsible for spreading falsehood. This is the threat that has happened to journalism, as we will see in the new caste laws of what the interpretation and what it all leads to. So, besides truth dissemination, there are provisions which bridle truth itself. Now let us look at the provisions. Our old existing law was called the Indian Penal Code. This was the law that classified crimes and prescribed punishment for them. That is why it was called Penal Code. And you'll hate me for saying this. If you kiss a girl or a boy in the metro in Hyderabad, do you think you will invite stares and people glaring at you? Yes or no? Yes. And people who know you, they'll tell your mom or your father, what a lousy girl that is. And they will say, she's a girl of easy morals. Don't worry, I'm not talking of you. Everybody will say, I'm a man of easy morals. Okay? So now, so don't feel hurt about it. However, if you, I know sir, you're too august to do that. If you kiss a woman or a man in a metro in New York, will anybody even stare at you? Look at you? Nobody. And if somebody said, this is a gentleman of easy morals, the girl by your side will glare at you and say, how ignorant. And the gentleman next to her will say, what makes you say this comment? And the person and the girl next to that will say, grow up. You seem to be living in the dark ages. That's what they call it. Okay? You got it? So, conduct. is a cultural, has a cultural factoring. And conduct, when it falls foul of a society and becomes grossly unacceptable, it is called a crime. Okay? If I ran away with you, I need a smart, young, hardworking reporter in my legal team. If I ran away with you and took the flight to Delhi, the conduct will not be called kidnapping. But if you are 12 years old, very intelligent, you were reported by Google to be solving all mathematical puzzles, and you had already been accepted as PhD candidate at Harvard. But still, if you are 12 and I ran away with you and took you via flight to Delhi, it would be called kidnapping. So conduct in a society, in a given society, has not only cultural moorings but also has certain other factoring. That factoring, that cultural mooring gives rise to what is called a crime. Okay? A lawyer can have sex with his client in California. It's completely acceptable. And a lawyer, if he has sex with his client in New York, he'll be barred from practice. It's called professional misconduct. The East Coast of America still has its vintage morality. The West Coast of America has its ultra-modern hue or color. This is there. So don't think that it's just limited to something. It's a matter of even terrains. It's a matter of collective acceptance and where you are and what you're doing. So the Indian Penal Code. Why did I say this? And why did I give you this example? I gave you this example to help you recollect. Paru is a cat. Arnav goes to Kacha does bakwas. Please do not believe that whatever is written in the Indian Penal Code is a crime. It's a crime prescribed by the Indian statute. That's what it is. Okay? So when a revision of this criminal code is made, which has been done, and it is called Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. So, and whatever things have been called crime in this, don't teach yourself to believe that that is a crime. That may be a crime, that may not be a crime, but it has been made a crime in the statute. You should have the capacity to think law. You should have the capacity to question law, and you should question law when it questions your duty as a journalist. Okay? That's the courage we want. That's what happened when Gandhiji was leading Salt Satyagraha. And that was a white man, remember, he was a Catholic. He had every reason to write against us. He did not, because he was a true journalist. So, let us look how has this new law impacted our conduct as journalists. So, the first portion of the Indian Penal Code has something which is called the general exceptions. And the general exceptions are meant to say this thing wasn't a crime. That's what the general exceptions are primarily meant to say. In this, we had a section 93, Indian Penal Code. And let us quickly read. What does it say? Communication made in good faith. No communication made in good faith is an offense by reason of any harm to the person to whom it is made, if it is made for the benefit of that person. No communication made in good faith is an offense by reason of any harm to the person to whom it is made, if it is made for the benefit of that person. An example is, If a surgeon in good faith communicates to a patient his opinion that he cannot live, and the patient dies in shock. एक नेताजी थे, वो ब्लड डोनेशन कैंप में गए, उन्होंने एक बोतल खून चढ़ा दिया, डोनेट किया और बेहोश हो गए। फिर उनको 2 बोतल खून चढ़ाया गया, तब होश आया। Got it? This is something like that. A surgeon told a patient, sweetheart, you've only a few months to live. Now that patient would have originally lived longer, but he was so full of zest of life that it shocked him and he died in shock. So the patient died promptly. Now his relatives sued the doctor. You bloody idiot. You were supposed to treat and cure my relative. Even if you knew he is going to die, why did you have to say he is supposed to die? I remember a very sad case. And I'm recounting this only to help you understand these are not fictional situations. One of the best days when I was outside an ICU with my mother inside, there was another patient's relative. And the next morning, when I came to change guard with my brother, she greeted me crying. I asked her, "Kya hua?" She was a lady. She said, "Bhaiya, brother, you are so lucky your mother's in the ICU." I said, "What is this?" I looked blank. My mother has died. And I had pleaded with the doctor, "Doc Saab, do not put a facial oxygen mask on her face. She has a very strong fear of it. And she will go into a shock." And the doctors put the oxygen mask to her face and she died promptly. That's a fact. So this illustration I have unfortunately lived to see in real life. And that's when I discovered that having your mother in the ICU is also being lucky. So amongst these general exceptions, this chapter has been put in a certain manner that helps somebody who is acting in good faith for the benefit of the person but may end up doing harm. So it protects that. This facet has been retained in the new code. Section 108 talks of who is an abettor, and section 108A talks of abatement in India of offences outside India. This entire stuff is very freely available on the internet, and you don't want to look up private publications, go in for Ministry of Home Affairs website. They have all these 3 bills in the PDF format. So you can download all 3 bills in their latest form. That's the most reliable version. 121 was a section that was dealing with offences against the state and which prescribed, first it defines what was waging or attempting to wage war or abetting of war against the government of India. Earlier, this government of India was not there and the word queen was there. Whoever wages war against the government of India or attempts to wage such war or abets the waging of such war shall be punished with death or imprisonment for life. Now, this is where language comes into play, where perception comes into play, and where interpretation comes to play. This wasn't poetry that I said. Where language comes into play means how the statute has been worded. Waging war. Then perception comes into play. As the collector of Warangal district, Are you seeing the landless laborers who've gathered and burnt the sub-collector's office because they were not given the pattas that recognized their rights of the land that was given to them by the previous government under the Land Ceiling Act? You followed this much? Now, if the collector of Warangal perceives this as a rightful protest for claiming whatever rights and as an angry expression in terms of burning the sub-collector's office, she lets it go. But if she perceives it harshly, she can very clearly say this is waging a war against India. Okay? And this has happened in many places in India and happens every day where? In Kashmir. That's what any damn thing that the people there do in protest is considered to be waging a war against India, and they haul them up. Journalists I'm talking of. Today, the Kashmiri journalists are more behind bars than on ground and in newsrooms. That's a fact. And when the government will challenge me for this, I will say no challenge is sustainable till access to facts has been given. They don't give access to facts. They just say, you've said the wrong thing, you've defamed the government, we'll take action against you. And every journalist worth the name has decided to put his pen down. Then there is a section, acts endangering sovereignty and unity and integrity of India. What is war? And why? What is the difference between a protest and a war? The language has not specified it, that this is war. The act has not specified it, that this is war. Then there are sections which will talk of incitement, inciting the general public to wage war against the state. So those sections are again sections which are going to hamper your journalistic activity. You have to only report that the Honorable Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Governor came, he inaugurated a new school. That's the kind of reporting. You can't do negative reporting. Negative reporting has to be done responsibly, has to be done reasonably, no doubt about it. But a reporter's right to privilege. Let me make this point, and this is a very important point for you to learn. Nobody in India has taken it up as yet, and I want Osmania University, Department of Mass Communication and Journalism to be the first to take it up, that the rights of journalists should be different and above the rights available under normal Article 19 of freedom of expression. And the liability on journalists for reporting should be different than the liability that is put on individual rumor mongers. Somebody said 50 people were killed in a train accident, and that was done due to the negligence of so-and-so, the cableman or whatever signaling. Now a journalist, if she hears the report here and is going to file her story tonight by 8 o'clock, cannot go to Khammam, count the bodies and be back and file her story. Or can you do that? What time is it? Sorry? 12:30. Between 12:30 and your filing time of 8. Can you go to Khammam, count 50 bodies? Obviously the bodies will not be arranged for you like books in a bookshop. Somebody will be poor fellow in the mortuary, somebody will be in the hospital, somebody would be on the side of the tracks, somebody would be lying in the fields. So counting 50 bodies will not be possible to count and report and file your story by 8 o'clock. Do not say this happened. Say it is reported that this happened. And if possible, say how it was reported that this happened. And if there are two reports, say two happened. Don't say ex-minister's son raped that girl. Excuse me, were you there? Were you there when Prajwal Ravanna was doing those things? Somebody manufactured 2,000 or 20,000 pen drives just before the elections and distributed it. And you are in an age of artificial intelligence. Your first duty is not to hold Prajwal Ravanna for having done the crime as a journalist. Your first duty is to say that these pen drives were discovered and it suggests that Prajwal Ravanna is the offender. However, we can't be sure. In an age of artificial intelligence, a tiger can be made a monkey and a monkey can be made to roar like a tiger. You know that more than I do. So you are picking the stick from the wrong end if you are just saying Prajwal Ravanna raped 2,000 women. You are being presumptive. Were you there? If you were not there, then tell me, for God's sake, how did you come to that conclusion? What is media trial? So you have to be careful in your reportings. If this were America, Prajwal Ravanna, while being in bars, would have first sued you for the story. He would have said, my lords, at the point of time when these pen drives came into public domain, this girl journalist wrote this story. At that point of time, it was not proven that I am the person culprit, I am the rapist, or I am the person who's done this. At that point of time, there was no proof that I have done it. Without even waiting to verify it, without even referring it to a IT lab, without even whatever coming to a conclusion, she wrote this story and I lost the election. So I deserve $100 million as compensation. So even when you are handling supposedly obvious stories, stop, look and think. It's very important. And then write something which helps you to be responsible and which helps you to keep in stride with law. Then nobody can hold you responsible for what you've written, because you've written on the basis of having heard something. It is reported. It is said. It is alleged. It is believed that the Prime Minister launched the electoral bonds scheme in order to benefit people who are going to give contributions to the Bharatiya Janata Party. Now look at this. The Prime Minister launched the electoral bonds scheme. Is it verifiable or not? Yes. To help people who had given BJP money in return for allocation of lucrative contracts. Is the allocation of lucrative contracts to Mr. XYZ verifiable? It can be verified. Railways has given a contract, Defence has given a contract. Okay? It's verifiable. So the Prime Minister launched the scheme, is verifiable, whether he launched or he did not. A list of certain people got lucrative contracts, is verifiable again. What is not verifiable is whether these people gave money in the electoral bonds or not. So if you are sued for this, you can demand the Supreme Court come out with the list of everyone who has paid any electoral bond to whoever, and you will never get the list, because that is where they will be exposed. And that is how you will not be sued successfully for it. So there are situations, there are methods when a smart journalist can get away with it. You can sue me. कब मुझे sue करोगे? When you have to show this list of people who've contributed to BJP. Law. And 90% of them are people who would have been given the contracts. So that you'll never get to see the list. And if you don't ever get to see the list, your prosecution will be quashed by the High Court. They can't successfully prosecute you. That's how this works. You know the rules of the game. Turn the tables on them if you're doing a journalistic duty. So you have to see what you are doing, how you are doing, and how you are wording it. And the new law, while it may have a lot of things, they may have a lot of provisions against citing of army, against public tranquility, against unlawful assembly, yet, and giving false evidence. There are provisions in this new law which do not allow you. For example, we have this section 212, refusing to answer public servant authorized to ask question. Refusing to answer public servant who is authorized to ask question. Where did you get this money to buy the ticket from? Supposing you are a thief. So honestly, you should be saying, I broke last night into Raghavan's house, opened his almirah and got the money. You should say this honestly. Okay. Now, if you don't, if you want to be truthful and you say, no, I will not answer the question. So you are booked under this law. Refusing to answer questions put up by public servant who is authorized to ask them. How do you address this? For this, you have got a Brahma Shastra. For this, you have a very powerful tool, and that is Constitution. Article 21, Article 14, Articles et al. These are famous articles in respect of fundamental rights, freedoms. Article 19(1) is freedom of expression. American jurists say that the freedom of expression includes the right to silence. Indian jurists today are learning to accept it. The freedom of expression includes the right to silence. So the day my client comes afflicted by this incrimination, that he has refused to answer a question put up by the authorized person to ask him, I will have this section quashed by either the High Court or the Supreme Court by saying this is violating constitutional right to silence. And there is another provision in the Constitution of India which is protection against self-incrimination. Every person has a right not to say something which will, what's your name? Who stole the money from Raghavan's house? Vasanta? Madhumita. Okay. So the constitutional right to silence also includes, and the constitutional protection against self-incrimination includes that Madhumita will not answer the question of the ticket collector, where did you get this money? Because if she says, I stole it from Raghavan's house, then she'll be eligible for a prosecution for breaking into Raghavan's house. Plus, she'll be eligible for prosecution for stealing the money. So, two prosecutions would be there. So, she has a right not to do it. So, there are many sections in this new law which will be thrown once people speak against them, once lawyers take it up. And what is the status of lawyers? I can say this without reluctance, that members of my fraternity today are worse than a herd of cows. They have these new laws coming up, and I do not hear a whisper of collective protest amongst lawyers. Whereas it was Gandhi ji, it was Maulana Hifzur Rahman Sehwarvi, his colleague in Satyagraha, salt Satyagraha, and it were many other people who not only questioned the laws of their time, and they were lawyers. Hafiz Muhammad Ibrahim was a lawyer, a great freedom fighter. Sardar Patel was a lawyer. Mahatma Gandhi was a lawyer. Jawaharlal Nehru was a lawyer. None of them were selling tea. They were all lawyers. And they knew the law, they questioned the law, they fought against the law, and they got the law overthrown. If salt tax was wrong, then GST on milk, which the children need, on medicines, which the sick people need, on surgical products, which the injured people need, cannot be held to be right. So it's only a matter of how and where you take the protest, how and where you take the change, and how and where you take your issues on. Remember, when I was a child, my father, who was serving in the Indian Administrative Service, took my hand and he brought me to a building which is by the side of the Rashtrapati Bhavan, the North Block and the South Block, where the Prime Minister's office is, and the Home Minister's and Finance Minister's offices. And he read what had been inscribed along the arch, on one side in Persian, on the other side in English, by the Britishers who created those buildings and those institutions, including the institution of democracy in India. And one inscription said, "Liberty does not descend to a people. Liberty does not descend to a people. The people have to rise and seek liberty." Okay? I thank you for your patience and for being with me.